One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. But I hate the sound of my voice. Those are usually the first words new podcasters tell me. Their confidence is shaken. They think they don't have what it takes. Their mind has misled them to believe they should be amazing the first time they sit down in front of the mic. You thought you were supposed to be good right out of the gate? Oh no, we're all terrible in the beginning. And guess what? You can't change the sound of your voice. So let's fill it with confidence instead. This book is meant to educate, inspire, and encourage you. I don't have some fancy degree in podcasting magic. I can't make you sound like you're in $1 million studio when you're really recording in your closet surrounded by piles of laundry. But I can teach you how to create content your audience craves every week. I can teach you how to sit at your mic with your head held high because you know you're talking to the exact person you want to reach. You're delivering valuable content, and you're not agonizing over all the stupid editing. Can we stop losing sleep over the editing? I'm not saying podcasting is easy. It takes a lot of work, planning, learning from mistakes, being vulnerable, and trying to improve every day. But with the things I'll teach you in this book, at least you'll have a lot of fun every step of the way. So let's get started. Okay, guys, that was the cover of my brand new book, Start a Binge-Worthy Podcast, a step-by-step guide to creating a podcast your audience craves. And it's actually on pre-order right now on Amazon. So go to thebestpodcastbook.com to order your copy of Start a Binge-Worthy Podcast. Again, that's thebestpodcastbook.com. It will be available on October 20th, 2020, and I cannot wait to see what you think of this brand new project, so go grab it, thebestpodcastbook.com. Grab your copy today. All right. I am super excited about today's episode because I'm going to share with you a little bit of I feel like I've been doing a lot more behind the scenes in the episodes that we've been putting out over the last probably 2 months, actually. And today is kind of some story blended in with the man with the plan. Now, what do I mean by that? I wanted to share with you today about the guy that got me listening to podcasts years ago before I even really knew what podcasts were. And technically, it wasn't a podcast, I wasn't on Apple Podcast listening. I'll explain it all in a little bit, but I can't wait to tell you all the things I've learned about podcasting from Dave Ramsey. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach entrepreneurs how to start, launch, and market their podcast. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of podcasting, think of this show as the time-saving shortcut you've been looking for. So let's get right to it, shall we? So I want to take you back. Let's go on a time journey together, okay? Because we are going to go back to around 2012, 2013. This was the era of me being in the corporate world. And my previous job, I was in the accounting department. I was in finance. And I was the person that paid invoices. That was my thing. That was my jam. And a lot of this job, whenever I first started, I was solely doing data entry all day, every day. I'm still fairly decent with my 10 keypad, and it's a lot of fun for me whenever I have to do a whole bunch. I'm putting together a spreadsheet and a report. This is where my love of spreadsheets actually really started. But I did so much data entry. And I did this along with my friend that I worked with for a few years, and her name was Geneva. And she was basically the only other person. She was my only friend at the time because I worked so much. We had 2 small children, and we just didn't get out a lot and do a lot of things. So she was my go-to for all things. And I remember we were having lunch one day, and she was telling me about her parents going through this Financial Peace University. And I was like, well, what is that? I don't even, who's Dave Ramsey? Who is that person? Okay. I'd never heard of him before. And she starts telling me about, it's this thing where you try to get out of debt and pay off all your, pay off your student loans, pay off your car, and do all these things that I had never heard of. I'd never even thought about it because I was still in my early 20s at this point. And, we had 2 small kids. All we knew was you go to college, you get a job, and then you live your life until you retire, and then you take care of your grandkids. We didn't really have the concept of, living a debt-free life. And I promise to not make this whole podcast about finances and money, but I do have to say that I'm so grateful for how we learned about Dave Ramsey in the time that we did. And I'll tell you about that in a second. That's actually my first point that I really want to get into today. But he is an icon in the radio world, and I think that there's so much to be learned from him about your finances, but also about podcasting. Because believe it or not, podcasts haven't been around forever, but he was doing radio shows, and he eventually transitioned into podcasting and doing all the things that he does. And we're going to get into that here in a second. But I just kind of wanted to give you a little background on how he got introduced into my world. I became obsessed with him. Oh my gosh. I am just a Ramsey believer. This is so funny. And I'm just sharing with this because, it's y'all. I have not applied for a job and I don't even know how many years. But I saw an ad on LinkedIn and it was for a Ramsey personality. This is Chris Hogan, Rachel Cruz, Christy Wright, like all those people are Ramsey personalities. And I thought, oh my gosh, how fun would that be to be a Ramsey personality? So I applied. I didn't get the job. Okay. Like just to let you know, I'm not abandoning you. This isn't me telling you I'm going anywhere. But man, it was so fun to say, what if I got to work with Dave Ramsey? How incredible is that, right? Okay, so that was just a fun little segue that I wanted to share with you because it was really fun. I was really nervous to do the application and I was like, oh my God, I don't even know how to write a cover letter anymore because I haven't applied for a job in so long, which is probably why they didn't even give me a consideration. But actually, I think that this worked out better because then I can still talk about podcasting all that I want to all the live long day. All right, so let's get into the 5 things that Dave Ramsey has taught me about podcasting. Now, if you want to write these down, that's cool. If you don't, if you're walking, if you're driving, if your kids are playing in the background and you're just like, I'm just trying to zone out for a little bit, I don't really want to do a whole bunch of stuff, that's cool. You can go to the show notes to find all the things that I'm going to talk about today. That's crystalprofit.com/episode 191. That's where you'll find all this. But the first thing that he taught me was to always put yourself on a budget. Now, I promise this is the only financial related one, but I feel like Dave would give me a slap on the wrist if I didn't at least mention that a little bit because that is what he's known for and that's what he's all about. And I'm not going to go through his whole story and all the reasons why he does finances and everything like that, but we did his program, Financial Peace University, back in 2014, and it was just the right time for us to get our financial shiitake together. Okay, I'll put it that way. I had just quit my job. I started staying at home with our boys and we really took a hit losing my income. And so having that in our back pocket to really rely on the teachings that he has on how to get on a budget and how to, save money and build wealth and do all those things was super helpful. And like I said, we can go into the business and the money side, all that another day. But if I hadn't learned how to budget really, really well before I started this business, I think I would have bankrupted Profit Media easily in the first year. Easily. There are too many shiny objects out there and cool softwares and equipment and ring lights and just all kinds of stuff that you could spend money on, especially whenever you're starting an online business. And I think that online marketers make it so appealing to make their programs, their platforms irresistible. But because I've always been on a budget with my business, it has helped me tremendously. Absolutely tremendously. And plus, I'm cheap. Y'all know this. You know this about me. I'm cheap anyway. But putting myself on a budget from the get-go has helped me grow my podcast in a way that feels right. I don't feel strapped. I don't feel like, oh my gosh, I have to pay my podcast host again this month and I have to worry about this and I have to do that. I feel very at ease with my business because I learned how to do a budget a long time ago. So that's number one. And that's not really about podcasting, but it is it's all the things. So if you want to learn more about Dave Ramsey's program, I'm not an affiliate. I'm not selling anything. I don't get any commission by mentioning this, but I do want to offer that to this community if you are looking for a way to figure out how to put yourself on a budget, either personally or professionally with your business. So that's number one. Always put yourself on a budget. Number two, consistency is key. Dave absolutely taught me this because after I dug into his story, and I'm actually going to put a link in the show notes, that is his company history. So if you do want to nerd out a little bit and you're like, let me go explore a little bit more about this Dave Ramsey guy, I'm going to put a link to his company history. I kind of went down a rabbit hole before I started recording because there were some things in there. And I've been a close follower of his and his daughters. And if y'all don't know this, I met Chris Hogan last year at his book signing. He's the one that talks about retirement. I was kind of on his podcast a few years ago, which is super cool. And we'll talk about that later. But
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
But he's been around forever. Dave has been doing this forever. And the reason why I say forever is because he's been doing this for almost 30 years. And when I say this, I'm talking about him doing personal finances and helping people with their money. That's what he's been doing in almost 30 years. He started in the early 90s and he started with radio, and he's had some form of a radio show since 1992, which is crazy, right? That's so crazy. It's so cool. And this is why I feel like people look at him, because now we'll talk about how his show has evolved over the years. But if you see him on camera and he's behind the microphone, he looks so calm, cool, and collected. Well, he should, right? He's been doing this for 30 plus years. Like, he is a pro, pro level status, 100%. But that consistency is so key. Could you imagine if he was just like, you know what? I think I'm going to do this radio thing like once a month. So that's like 12 times a year. And, or just when I feel like it. I'll probably do that radio show. No, y'all, he committed and he went all in, and he's been doing this for close to 30 years, which is so crazy. So I want you to take that same principle and apply it to your podcast. We've talked about consistency before. You can go back and listen to previous episodes about how to be consistent, how to create workflows and content calendars and all kinds of things to help you be successful with your podcast. But consistency is the key. And this is absolutely one of the things that I see Dave does so well. His team does this so well, and all the people that work within his organization. So I wanted to just applaud them and say, y'all are doing it. Anytime I go, it was funny. It's not funny, but it's in hindsight kind of thing. When all the financial stuff first started happening in 2020, it was early March, late March, early April. I remember I went to Dave Ramsey's Facebook page and I was like, what is Dave saying about finances? And I know there are probably 50 other people out there who are smarter than him or have different perspectives than him whenever it comes to finances and the marketplace and what's actually happening. But he was my go-to guy because I've listened to him for years. He has been a mentor of mine for years whenever it comes to personal finances. So the first thing I thought of whenever that we were in an economic downturn, I was like, I got to go see what Dave Ramsey says. Why? Why did I do that? Because he's consistent, right? He is always there. And this is how I want your audience to see you, no matter the topic, whatever you talk about on your podcast. I want them to say, well, what does Sarah say about that? How can Sean help me with this? What does Dave think about that part of the process? Whatever your topic is about, I want you to be that person that pops into someone's mind and says, I want to go see what Lori has to say about this because I'm stumped. I don't know what to think. And I want to see, does she have a podcast episode? Did she post about this on Instagram? I want to go see this. That is how you can do that, is by being consistent with your podcast. Okay. So number 1 is always put yourself on a budget. 2, consistency is key. Number 3, always be yourself. And if you've listened to this podcast for a while, you know that this is something that it's like, what is it? If you're going to talk the talk, you better walk the walk. This is something I do on a regular basis. I show up as myself, as weird and as quirky and telling y'all probably behind the scenes stuff that you could care less about, but I hope that it makes you laugh a little bit whenever I tell you I'm looking at weird memes on my computer right before I start recording, or that I am surrounded by piles of laundry whenever I record in my closet. Like, that's real. That's real talk. I'm not today. I'm actually in my office today. I'm not recording in my closet. Sorry to disappoint you, but I'm always myself. And Dave absolutely taught me this because I learned real fast whenever I started talking to other people around me about like, oh, I'm doing this Financial Peace University thing. I feel like people that knew who he was immediately had an opinion, whether it was good or bad, right? They were like, oh my gosh, yes, he's so smart. Like, he helped us get out of debt and all the things. Or they were like, he has no idea what he's talking about. Paying off your mortgage early is dumb, like whatever the opinion was, but he was himself. You know who he is whenever, like, you see Dave Ramsey on Facebook, Instagram, a live event. We've seen him at live events. I've read his books, like all the things. He is the same person across all the platforms because he's just himself. And some people will love you, some people will hate you, but it's absolutely worth showing your true self behind the microphone at all times. 100%, because then you don't have to put on this show, right? It's just you showing up behind the mic, right? As imperfect as we all are, I think that people would rather see that than to assume that you're one person, like the person you pretend to be behind the microphone, and then you show up in a different way and people are like, oh, wait, I don't know who this person is. Like, this, you've been putting on this facade and we thought you were this way, but it turns out you're really not. So, and I guess that kind of goes into other people's expectations and all that stuff, right? Like, we're not in the business of making everybody happy, but always be yourself. Always, always, always be yourself behind the microphone. Don't try to pretend that you know more than you do about your topic. Show up as who you are and commit to being a lifelong learner about what your podcast topic is about. That's like, I cannot give better advice, especially to those of you who are just getting started and you're like, I just don't know. I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I know enough about my podcast topic. It doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you to show up as yourself, just as you are, and commit to always learning. But don't show up and try to be someone that you're not. Okay, so that was number 3, always be yourself. Number 4, Dave taught me to ask yourself, how can I make my audience want to participate? Now, if you don't know this about Dave, he has done a call-in radio show for a long time. I don't know that that's how his radio first started way back in the day, or if it was just him talking, or if he's always had callers. I'm not really sure about the history and the timeline of how that all evolved on the back end, but he's always been engaging an audience in some sort. I've seen him, like I said, at a live event. My husband and I went to, it's called the Smart Money Conference. I think that was in 2013 because we were still, I was still working. I do remember that. And I think it was a one-day conference. Yeah. So we went and did that. That was the first time we saw him live. And man, it was so awesome. It was such a good conference. And that's actually where I learned about the other different people that work in his organization that I started following, I started learning from, I started buying their books, and just got really entrenched in the Ramsey culture because I wanted to participate. I was an active participant in what they were doing because I wanted to get the results that he was promising, and I wanted to follow this path that I knew would make my life better, right? So I want you to think about, how can you take that same model and apply it to your podcast? So Dave has done, they also have their debt-free screams, which I think is so cool. So again, for those of you that don't know, he has and I don't know how it is with the pandemic and everything like that, but he will celebrate with people whenever they are debt-free, and they would get to come into their offices if they're Ramsey personality, their Ramsey offices. I think it's the Lambo Group is the name of his official organization. And they do these debt-free screams where they just get to scream into a microphone, "We're debt-free." I mean, I think it's the coolest thing ever because people, apparently there's like a whole scheduling system. Like if you want to do your debt-free scream in their offices, you have to schedule it out because it is a high demand thing. People are like, "Oh, I'm debt-free," or "I'm going to be debt-free. I'm going to schedule my scream with Dave so I can go to his offices and do it there and do it with him," because that's part of the culture. And then they have live events, book signings. You could visit their office. You can listen to their other shows. So I want you to think, how can I create a community that does similar things where people just want to participate? They are excited to participate. Is it creating a Facebook group? Is it creating a membership to go along with your podcast, or another type of online community where people are interested in your podcast topic and they can all chat about it together? It's not something that, like, I don't want you to look at it as, "Oh my gosh, that's one more thing I have to do. That's one more thing on my to-do list that I have to manage. That's one more thing." I don't want you to be thinking about it that way. I want you to be thinking about how can you serve your people in a way where they are creating podcasts about how well you serve their audience and how much they love to learn from you. Because that's what I'm doing right now. Like, I'm totally like fangirling on Dave Ramsey and the community of people that he has created around his culture. Like, it is an ingrained culture now. Like, if you talk to someone who has done Financial Peace University, they're like, "Oh yeah, I totally do the envelope system. You know, cash is king." And they have all these like phrases that are built into this culture. And it just has this huge ripple effect once it takes off like wildfire. So how can you do that with your podcast? How can you create a sense of like audience participation with what you're creating? And I know like we can't do live events right now, and we're limited to what we can actually, in-person things and all that. But I want you to be thinking, how can I connect with my people and have them want to connect with each other in a way that will help further this message, further this topic discussion? Those are questions that I want you to ask yourself, and I want you to keep asking yourself over and over again, because who knows what it will evolve into. One idea could be sparked into something else that just totally blows you away. Okay, so that was number 4. Ask yourself, how can I make my audience want to participate? And the 5th thing that I learned from Dave Ramsey about podcasting is to keep trying new things. And the way that I apply this to podcasting is Dave didn't just stay on the radio, right? Like, he built a successful career, like being syndicated in all these different places, and people just knew on talk radio who Dave Ramsey was because he was so successful in what he did. And he probably got really comfortable, but he didn't just stay in one spot. He didn't just stay comfortable in this idea of, I'm just going to be a radio show host. I don't want to branch out. I'm just going to do this radio thing. He eventually branched out into other markets, other platforms, and even specific topics within finances. And I've said it a few times here already, but he has a whole team of people. He has hundreds of employees. So it's not like it's him doing this all by himself. And I don't say that to discourage you, especially if you're just getting started with your podcast or your online business right now. And you're like, well, must be nice for him. I don't have a whole team of people. It's just me getting started. Well, that's how he got started too. But he didn't just stay comfortable and say, I'm just going to do what I know. I don't think I want to try new things. I'm just going to sit here and just, kind of watch from the sidelines and see what's happening. He got out there, he tried a few things, and I can tell you, I've heard stories. I've listened to him at live events where he talks about stories where an idea or a product just absolutely tanked. And he was like, we were embarrassed about it, but you know what? We pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps and we kept going. We kept marching on because they knew that the topic of people getting out of debt was so important for them to tackle for each individual that they just kept going. They were like, our mistakes, no matter how big they were, no matter how public they were, they knew that that was just part of the journey and they were committed to keep going. So he eventually started a live broadcast show where you can watch videos of all of his calls. Like I'm going to link to in the show notes, again, crystalprofit.com/episode 191. I'm going to show you, because this is actually what I used to do. Okay, so I told y'all in the beginning, I used to listen to him whenever I was working my 9 to 5 and doing all this data entry work. So what I would do, it's totally sneaky sneaks, but I'm like, whatever, I don't even care. I haven't worked for that company in a long time, but I would have, there was like a window in the back, right? So I'd have a tab open and then I would turn it on and then I would minimize, it. And I would just let his radio show play in the background. And because they had an archive of old videos, I would listen to it for hours. Like my whole day at work was completely filled with Dave Ramsey in my ear. Like I had headphones in while I'm doing my data entry and I would just listen to it all day. And my husband, I'm sure, was so sick of me coming home and saying, well, Dave says this and you can't spend money on that and we need to watch pennies on this. Like I just know he got so sick of me talking about Dave Ramsey and the things that he said about finances. But again, I was committed to learning about it, like of personal finances and getting out of debt. And I knew that Dave was a person that I wanted to learn from. And had he not started to branch out from just the radio and doing that, I never would have found him because I didn't listen to like just regular radio that often. Even when I was commuting, I'd have a CD in or I'd, turn something on my phone or something like that. But I just want to keep encouraging you to try new things. Don't get so comfortable and complacent with just where you are right now. I want you to branch out. I want you to say, you know what? I have this idea for a crazy podcast topic and I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to try it. Or challenge yourself to say, I've never once done a live video, but I think I'm going to do it. Like that's actually my challenge to you. And I would encourage you, if you're going to do that, please tag me. Do your first Insta story. Like go on Instagram, do your first Instagram story and say, okay, my podcast coach, Crystal Profit, told me that I have to start branching out and doing things in my business that scare me a little, but I know will help me become a better marketer, will help me be able to talk about my podcast a little bit easier. And the dang girl told me I gotta do an Instagram story or hop on Facebook Live and say, all right, guys, I want to tell you about my latest episode of the podcast. It's not going to be comfortable. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be challenging. That's why I'm challenging you to do this. But again, if Dave had stayed comfortable, I have no doubt that he would not be where he is today, had he not stepped out of his comfort zone. I promise you that so much of his success of growing his company to hundreds of employees and a hundreds of millions of dollars company is directly related to his ability to reach his audience in such a real way. I truly believe that. I really do. I think that him showing up consistently, being himself and not being afraid to try new things has led to so much of his success. But that's all I have for you today, guys. So real fast, I'm going to do a quick recap. So the 5 things that Dave Ramsey's taught me about podcasting is always put yourself on a budget. Number 1. Number 2, consistency is key. Number 3, always be yourself. Number 4, ask yourself, how can I make my audience want to participate? Number 5, keep trying new things. So that's all I have for you today. Again, go to crystalprofit.com/episode 191 to check out the show notes and all the things that I've mentioned here today. I have the Dave Ramsey's, their history. You can go check out all the things that they've done, as well as a link to Financial Peace University if you want to know more about that. Make sure that you go check out thebestpodcastbook.com. And I would love for you to pre-order your copy of Start a Binge-Worthy Podcast that comes out on 10/20/2020. If you've enjoyed this podcast here, then I have no doubt that you will absolutely love this book. I'm actually in the process of recording the audiobook now. I'm just about to get started and I'm a little nervous. And this is going back to trying new things. I've never recorded an audiobook, so it's going to be a learning experience for all of us. But that does it for today. So remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.